Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a set of stories so gripping, you might never look at the road or a rest stop the same way again. We'll explore unexpected dangers, eerie encounters, and moments that test the limits of fear. Story 1. The road trip that turned into a nightmare. My name is Carlos, and last year I took a road trip that I still can't forget. Normally, I would have taken a plane to visit my close friends in Berkeley, California, because they moved there after high school to study at UC Berkeley. We've known each other for so long that they're practically my brothers. Every summer, I go there to spend a couple of weeks with them, relaxing and hanging out, but last year, I wanted to do something different. I decided to drive so I could stop at several places along the way, parks, museums, and historical sites. I left my home very early on the first day, hoping to reach Berkeley in 3 days. The first 2 days went perfectly. I visited some parks, saw a few museums, and took many pictures. Everything felt peaceful, like a normal summer adventure. On the third day, though, things went very wrong. By that point, it was already late, around 9 or 10 at night, and I was still on the road. I felt exhausted but pushed on, eager to arrive at my friend's place. The highway was quiet, almost deserted. I've always been a bit afraid of lonely roads at night. It's a strange feeling, both calming and unsettling at the same time. Finally, I realized I needed a break. I had to use the bathroom and wanted a cup of coffee to stay awake. Luckily, I saw a small rest stop sign and took that exit. This rest stop was tiny, just a small building with some parking spaces in front. No big lights, no gas station next to it, and no trucks parked around. Still, it seemed enough for my needs. I parked my car and noticed it was really dark and very quiet. Nobody else was there. I grabbed my jacket, stretched my arms and legs because they felt stiff after hours of driving, then walked inside. Inside the building, I saw a short hallway. On one side was a men's restroom and a janitor's closet. On the other side was a women's restroom. There were also a couple of vending machines and a rack of magazines by the wall. I paused at one of the machines, looking for an energy drink, then turned around and spotted a car pulling into park, right next to mine. It made me uncomfortable. The parking lot was wide open, with many empty spaces. Why would that driver park so close, directly beside my car? Trying not to overthink, I went into the bathroom, hoping the driver was just another traveler needing a break. About 5 minutes later, I came out. That same car was still parked next to mine, with its headlights on. The engine was running. It seemed the driver was still inside. Something about that felt off. I tried to ignore it and walked back over to the vending machine to buy a can of Red Bull. As I sipped the drink, I kept glancing at the car. Even from inside the rest stop, I could see its headlights shining. I decided not to panic. I was probably just imagining things. Finally, I headed for the door to go back outside. The instant I did, I heard the other car's engine shut off. The door on the driver's side opened, and out stepped a tall, bearded man wearing a brown leather jacket. Both his hands were stuffed into his pockets. He started walking toward me, and my instincts screamed that something was wrong. My heart pounded, but I tried to look calm. His eyes locked onto me with a strange, menacing expression. We crossed paths in front of the building. I tried to be polite and nodded a greeting. He nodded back. Then, just a few steps past me, he called out, "Hey!" The tone of his voice wasn't friendly. Nervous, I turned around and froze. He had a 9mm pistol pointed straight at my face. My mind went blank as I raised my hands, almost on autopilot, trying to show I wasn't resisting. "Give me your watch, your wallet, and your cell phone," he hissed. I did so without argument. I hoped he would just let me go. But after grabbing my stuff, he motioned with his gun for me to move toward the back of the building, where the forest was thick and dark. My stomach churned. If all he wanted was my valuables, why march me into the woods? He ordered me to walk deeper into the forest. I could barely breathe. My legs felt like jelly. All I could think about was that this stranger might kill me and leave me there. Every step felt like it could be my last. We finally stopped around 15 or 20 meters in. He had me turn to face him, the barrel of his gun aimed right between my eyes. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I thought about my parents and how crushed they'd be if I never came home. He told me to kneel. I closed my eyes, trembling, expecting to die. I heard 3 loud gunshots, bang, 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 so close they made my ears ring. I collapsed to the ground, screaming, certain I'd been shot, but there was no pain. I realized he hadn't actually fired at me. He was laughing as though it was some big joke. "Go home, kid, and don't forget to wash your pants," he sneered. Then he walked away, still chuckling. I just lay there, sobbing in shock for a few minutes. After I recovered a bit, I rushed back to my car, stopping briefly in the restroom to splash water on my face. I was a total wreck. My face was swollen from crying, and my nose was dripping. Eventually, I managed to drive to the next town, call the police, and file a report. The officers took notes, but as far as I know, they never caught the man. By the time I got to Berkeley, my friends were horrified to hear what had happened. Even today, remembering it fills me with fear, relief, and humiliation all at once. I'm just thankful to be alive. Story 2. Dan, the long-haul trucker. Hello, my name is Dan, and I've been driving trucks for over 25 years. About 4 years ago, I had an experience that changed me forever. It was a stormy night. Around 4 a.m. I was 4 hours from my delivery destination, hauling a load of industrial supplies along a long, empty highway. A torrential downpour started out of nowhere. Visibility dropped so much I could barely see the white lines on the road. I've driven in heavy rain many times, so I was cautious but not panicked. Still, something just felt off. I couldn't pinpoint why, but my whole body was on edge. I turned on the radio, hoping the music would distract me from the strange restlessness. Then, out of the fog, I saw headlights speeding directly toward my truck, like a phantom car going the wrong way. There was no time to think. I yanked my steering wheel to avoid a collision. Because the road was wet, I lost control, and my truck flipped. It felt like the world spun in slow motion. Then everything went black. I woke up in the wreckage, lying on the cold, wet ground. My head pounded, and I couldn't move my legs. I tried calling for help, but my voice was too weak. Darkness circled around my vision. Just when I felt sure I was finished, I heard footsteps. A father and son, traveling in another vehicle behind me, found me and called an ambulance. I slipped in and out of consciousness, unsure if I'd live. Doctors told me later I had broken bones, internal bleeding, and a severe head injury. I was lucky to have survived. They said my recovery in the hospital was slow and painful. As days turned into weeks, something weird kept happening. I would sense somebody watching me at night. Then one evening, I actually saw a dark figure at the foot of my bed, tall, shadowy, no clear face. Fear seized me. I wanted to scream, but my voice failed. The figure moved closer and closer until I felt cold breath on my face. Suddenly, I shut my eyes, praying silently, and when I opened them again, the figure was gone. The nurses insisted it was sleep paralysis, a side effect of my injuries and stress. But I remained convinced something else was happening. Over time, I saw the figure more often. It never harmed me, but its presence felt suffocating. One night, it whispered. It told me it was a truck driver who had died on that same stretch of road decades earlier, in a head-on crash with a drunk driver going the wrong way. My accident was almost a repeat of his fate. Right then, a nurse entered my room, turning on the lights, and the figure vanished. I never saw it again. But afterward, I searched online and found a report from 35 years ago about a fatal collision between a truck and a wrong-way sedan, matching the details of what the figure had told me. That's when I realized it was most likely the spirit of the car's driver, or maybe the truck driver, reliving the crash. Since I recovered, I've never passed that highway without thinking of that night. Occasionally, I say a quiet prayer for whoever still lingers there, hoping they can find peace. I keep driving trucks, because that's my life, but I know there's more on lonely roads than meets the eye. Story 3. ELO's Terrifying Encounter. My name is Elo, and the year was 2008. I was driving my cargo truck through southern Missouri, carrying steel sheets for a construction job. It was summer, and scorching hot. I had over 20 years on the road by then, so I was no rookie. Still, that day shook me to the core. I was making great time along Highway 60, passing through the Mark Twain National Forest. It's beautiful by day, haunting at night. I planned to stop at a truck stop near Springfield, just to stretch, use the bathroom, maybe grab some food, before continuing my route. But about 20 miles out, I spotted an old, beaten truck on the shoulder with its hood up. A man waved me down, clearly in trouble. We truckers have an unwritten rule to help each other. I parked ahead and approached him. He was about 45, with a baseball cap, sweat all over, grease on his face and hands. He introduced himself as Neil. He said the alternator was shot, and he'd been stranded for 4 or 5 hours. He asked if I could give him a ride to the next town, about 20 miles away, so he could find a mechanic or a part in the morning. I sized him up. He looked harmless enough, so I told him to grab his duffel bag and hop in. We hadn't driven far when I noticed 2 cars in my rearview mirror, following way too close. They never tried to pass me, despite the road being mostly empty. Nervous, I asked Neil if he recognized them. He shook his head, looking anxious. Finally, both cars sped up, swerved in front of me, and forced me to brake hard. 3 men got out, each armed with a gun. My pulse went through the roof. They ordered us out of the truck and told us to empty our pockets. Neil was so pale I worried he might faint. They took our wallets, phones, and keys. Then, instead of driving off, they tossed me my truck keys again and demanded I start it up. Meanwhile, one of them shoved Neil into the back seat of their car. Another man pointed a gun at me from the passenger seat as I drove the truck. Following the lead car, the third followed behind in another vehicle. They led us down a dirt road, deep into the forest. Tall trees blocked the moonlight. My mind raced with plans to escape, but they had Neil, so I couldn't just run. Soon, we reached a small clearing with a rundown cabin. They forced Neil and me inside, guns at our backs. The cabin was filled with trash, and the furniture was old and grimy. They made us sit on a dusty couch, tied our wrists and ankles. One of them sneered, Don't go running to the cops." Then they left, taking our things, slamming the door behind them. We heard their cars drive away. Shaking, I struggled to untie the ropes. Neil asked me in a trembling voice, "They're going to kill us, right?" Trying to sound braver than I felt. I answered, "Not if we escape first." After a few painful minutes, I got free and untied Neil. We carefully crept out of the cabin. The darkness was nearly absolute. We guessed which way might lead us back to the road. Fear gnawed at us. What if the men returned? Or what if they were waiting outside? But we had no choice. We trudged through the woods until we found the highway. We walked along the edge, ready to dash into the trees if we heard a vehicle approach. Eventually, an old sedan came by. I waved my arms and yelled for help, terrified it might be the kidnappers again. But it was just an older man named Jeff. Suspicious at first, he listened to our story, then told us to get in and said he'd drive us to the nearest sheriff's office. Our relief was immeasurable. At the station, we explained everything. The sheriff sent patrol cars out to look for the men. They found my abandoned truck deep in the woods, mostly undamaged. However, the kidnappers were gone. Neil and I parted ways soon after, exchanging phone numbers. I never saw him again, but I remember him whenever I drive through southern Missouri. Even now, I'm more cautious, always scanning mirrors to see if somebody is following me. Life on the road continues, but that night changed me forever. Story 4. Ernesto and the Mysterious Taco Truck. My name is Ernesto. I used to work night shifts in Arizona on a ranch-turned-hotel, practically in the middle of nowhere. The job itself was easy, but the worst part was driving an hour and a half to get home every single night. After a while, I got used to it. One evening, about halfway through my drive, I spotted a taco truck parked outside a small RV park. I was starving, so I decided to give it a try. I had the best tacos of my life that night, maybe because I was super hungry. But they tasted fantastic. The cook, a friendly man in a stained apron, offered a range of salsas. I started stopping there regularly, chatting with him about random things, my day at work, music, the desert heat. Oddly enough, I never learned his name, and he never asked for mine. We just bonded through hot tacos and cold soda. One night, after maybe 40 or 50 visits, I arrived to find the place in total silence. The lights on the truck were on, but the cook was nowhere in sight. I waited, expecting him to appear from behind the truck or maybe from the RV park. Nothing. Then I smelled something burning, like overcooked meat. Smoke rose from the grill area inside the truck. Worried the whole truck might catch fire, I knocked on the metal side. "Hey, your grill is burning," I called. Still no response. Alarmed, I climbed the small retractable steps and gently opened the service door. The first thing I saw was an open, overturned cash register drawer, with coins scattered everywhere. That was suspicious, maybe a robbery. But that wasn't the worst of it. Stepping closer to turn off the grill, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. A scorched, black handprint burned onto the metal surface, like a human hand had been pressed there. Seared into the grill, panic overwhelmed me. I stumbled, nearly falling off the small steps. My mind raced. Was someone attacked? Kidnapped? Worse? I managed to reach under the grill and turn off the flames. Then I rushed out of the truck, closed the door, and called the police. The dispatcher took my statement. They said officers would come by, but nobody arrived while I stood there, waiting in the darkness, for nearly an hour. Eventually, I just drove home, scared out of my wits. I never saw that taco truck again. It completely disappeared. To this day, I have no idea what happened to that cook. I regret never learning his name. Maybe it wouldn't have helped, but it feels like an important piece of a jigsaw puzzle that I can never complete. I searched the local papers online, but found nothing matching taco truck, possible robbery, burned hand. It still unsettles me every time I recall that burnt handprint on the grill. Story 5. The horrifying rest stop chase. My name is Maria, and I had my scariest experience 6 years ago in June 2018. I took a spontaneous solo trip, hoping to see as many sights as possible before heading back to college in August. My plan was to leave at sunrise, visit different attractions throughout the day, and drive home late at night, saving money by skipping hotel fees. The trip there was great. I explored scenic views and hidden gems, but leaving for home around 10 p.m. turned into a nightmare. I was about halfway back, maybe 2 hours into the drive, when exhaustion hit me hard. My eyes kept drooping, and I was afraid of dozing off behind the wheel. Apple Maps said I still had about another 2.5 hours to go. I decided I'd pull into the next rest stop and take a nap. At around midnight, I saw the rest stop sign. The parking lot was empty except for a few lampposts giving off a dull glow. I parked and leaned my seat back, setting my phone's alarm for an hour. When it buzzed, I realized I needed the restroom. Better to go inside now than wait until the next exit, I thought. The building was quiet and deserted. I walked into the ladies' room. About half a minute later, I heard faint voices in the hallway. I paused, curious who else might be here. Then, the restroom door opened. Footsteps came in, but no one said anything. I thought maybe it was just another traveler. Suddenly, there was a light knock on the door of my stall. A chill went down my spine. "Occupied," I said. Silence. Then I noticed an eye peeking through the stall crack. The moment we locked gazes, the person started shrieking, an unhinged sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. He then began smashing his head against the door, rattling it so violently I thought it would bust open. I braced my feet and back against the stall's walls to hold it shut. But the force kept growing. Terrified, I rushed forward, throwing the door open with all my strength. The impact knocked him backward, giving me just enough time to bolt out of the restroom and across the parking lot to my car. Before I could fully process what was happening, I heard the main door slam behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the same man chasing me. Still screaming, my adrenaline kicked in, and I sprinted to my car, fumbled with the keys, and started the engine. As I pulled out, he lunged and slammed into my driver's side door. I managed to keep going. Checking the rearview mirror, I watched him stand there, watching me flee, until his figure disappeared into the darkness. The rest of my drive home was a blur. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I must have been going way too fast. By the time I reached home, it was dawn. I never reported it to the police, mostly out of sheer shock. But I regret that choice now. I never, ever stop at rest stops anymore. And I warn all my friends about the risks of deserted places at night. Each of these stories shares a common thread. The road can be full of surprises, sometimes terrifying, sometimes tragic. Whether you're a seasoned truck driver, a night shift worker heading home, or a solo traveler trying to reach a destination, you never know who or what you might encounter out there. If you take anything away from these stories, let it be that the road isn't always just asphalt and lines. It can hold dark corners where malice, desperation, or unexplainable forces wait for their next passerby. So drive safely, everyone, both literally and figuratively. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, if you ever have a story you want to share, drop it in the comments or shoot me an email. Until next time, stay safe.